Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have another great show for you today on this lovely Thursday morning, the last day before
the storm.
I guess. People are so freaked out about this. I am a doubter. I think there'll be a little light dusting of snow and we'll all be fine. We'll all go about our way. But people are, taking all the store shelves. They're talking about they wanted to bring us into a hotel this weekend to stay here. But I live right over there. It was just crazy. I won't do it. I live right there.
As somebody who lived for years in Denver, don't take a storm warning as a joke, okay?
No,
it could get crazy.
I lived in Michigan where...
Oh, so you understand.
There's a giant pile of snowfalls and then they plow all the roads within like 8 hours of that happening and everything's fine.
I know, but have you been in a blizzard before? Sometimes it gets a little hectic. It's hard to get to places like work, so that's why they want you to be here.
I'm used to maybe here in the South they're not prepared for inclement weather, but I think everybody's being a little bit of a baby about it.
Oh, well, coming up on Rising, the House Oversight Committee voted to hold former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton in contempt of Congress after they skipped depositions in relation to Jeffrey Epstein.
Plus, President Trump says that he will not use force to acquire Greenland and that he's reached a deal with NATO with regards to the Arctic island. Great.
Taco. And remember that time Senator Ted Cruz... I'm going to calm down. Remember that time Senator Ted Cruz left for Cancun in 2021 when a deadly winter storm hit Texas? Well, the senator apparently flew to California recently as the lone state is preparing for this winter storm that we were all talking about. We'll see what he has to say for himself. But first, Robby, what's on your radar?
Well, CNN's Scott Jennings is spitting fire, objecting to bald-faced lies spouting by one of his fellow panelists. Now, we already discussed some of the clips from that recent episode, but I was gobsmacked when I saw this one. Cameron Kasky, progressive commentator and briefly a Democratic candidate for the House, he accused President Trump of being part of a sex trafficking ring. Jennings rightly called him out for uttering such an absurd lie. Watch this.
I am appreciative that the president is being transparent about this. I would love it if he was more transparent about the human sex trafficking network that he was a part of, but you can't win them all.
Cameron's grateful that the president is being transparent about the Nobel Peace Prize and his desires for Greenland. Scott, what do you think about that?
You going to let that sit? Are we going to claim here on CNN that the president is part of a global sex trafficking ring? Or,
well,
we're
going to talk about the Epstein file. Scott, I will do the fact checking as we go along here. Repeat what you said about the global sex trafficking ring.
That Donald Trump was provably very involved with it.
Okay, we'll get to that later. I mean, Donald Trump has never been charged with any crimes in relation to Jeffrey Epstein. But
let's be adults here.
We'll talk about that.
Let's be serious.
Satisfied? Now answer the question about Greenland.
So let's reiterate. Kasky said Donald Trump was provably very involved with a global sex trafficking ring. This is, of course, false. Trump was provably an acquaintance of Jeffrey Epstein, a sexual predator in the 90s and early aughts, just like the Clintons and a whole host of other famous people. Trump's association with Epstein ended before the sex crimes came to light, and no one has presented a shred of evidence that Trump was involved in the sex crimes. Nor have they proven the Clintons were either. This is where the discourse is surrounding Epstein. Anyone who has met him even once can be smeared as very involved in a sex trafficking ring on CNN. To be clear, the network is not responsible for the crazy things its guests say. They should have on a range of perspectives, of course. I expect, however, that they would not invite to sit on one of those panels a 9/11 truther, or Stop the Steal obsessive, or, to use an even more similar example, a Pizzagate conspiracy theorist. Pizzagate, remember that one? You may recall that it was an online social media conspiracy promoted by fringe far-right personalities, that there was an underground child sex ring at a pizza place in Washington, D.C., and it was somehow connected to the Clintons and to other high-profile Democrats. Responsible mainstream journalists worked to debunk the conspiracy theory. They did not invite its adherents to become regular commentators on CNN. My, how times have changed. In fairness to Kasky, the Epstein sex trafficking ring is real, and it has real victims, and it is right to keep seeking answers about who else might have been involved with it. I support efforts by Thomas Massie, Ro Khanna, and others to release all government files relating to Epstein, and I've criticized the administration for moving slowly on that. But you just can't say that Trump is provably very involved in a sex trafficking ring. That's totally false, and it's made up, and it's the kind of vicious smear, in fact, that discredits good faith efforts to expose Epstein and his fellow abusers. And Trump is a litigious man, and I wonder if he caught wind of that clip because it seemed a little bit defamatory to me.
Well, like you
very
said,
involved,
First of all, Abby Phillips can't take vacation anymore because if she was there, she probably would have just cleared that up. But also, Scott Jennings rightfully asked the host to correct it because it's not
so they
the
don't
job.
Get sued.
Yeah, it's not the job of the commentators. Like, it is their job to be well read and state facts more than their analysis leading. Like, you hope that the people that are given this platform that people automatically assume is of expertise will actually do some research and make sure that they're making proven statements. But when it happens that something that you say is miscalculated or overstated, the host should certainly clear it up, right? That's the job of CNN. But also
overstated, just a lie. What if I wanted to have on one of those people who thought the Clintons murdered Seth Rich or something? Remember that conspiracy? All those various.
Yeah, I know, but say someone has Candace Owens on. She's saying conspiracy theories. You say some conspiracy theories are worth giving air to. So you have to correct that nothing has been proven. That's the host's job. But this is exactly how a real issue turns into like a partisan back and forth and a partisan sludge, because you can prove that the president needs to come forward and say more about Epstein and say that you don't like the way that the administration is handling the documents, the fact that they released only 1% and have millions of more pages, 500 different people combing through these things, redacting everything. You can say that firmly with your chest as a contributor that doesn't like the way that the administration is handling this. But you don't have to start to add fluff in there to make the president feel guilty of more than we have any type of proof of. People are saying you're not handling this well. We've seen several polls say they want more information. The American public wants more information. But trying to say that the president and connecting dots that just aren't there, that criminalize him.
I'm forced to consider that this commentator is representative of a wide swath of the population, a representative of liberal, progressive, democratic thought. Democrats have convinced themselves that Trump is provably involved with Epstein in the same way that some on the right have convinced themselves the Clintons are provably involved. And I said this yesterday, and I will continue to say it, that this has moved into conspiracy theory territory because people are, for the most part, partisan and only interested in this story to the extent it tarnishes in their mind their political enemies, when this is really not the case, and that there is no evidence that we can connect the political folks to what Epstein did that was wrong. We can look very critically and with skepticism at some of his ongoing associations with political figures, maybe like Steve Bannon, Stacey Plaskett, and others that I keep mentioning, where they had ongoing contact with, not any evidence of actual sex criminal behavior on their part, but continued contact with him well into the end of his lifetime that we would like to know more information about. But even that is just, why did you keep talking to a guy who had been, to prison for this? It's not, there's no evidence against them of sexual impropriety either. The one person of significance who got accused in the public, Alan Dershowitz, she recanted that accusation. So I'm forced to concede that, but then maybe this is how Democrats feel now. Maybe it's been made into this is Trump is involved in sex crimes. That's what they think. It's wrong.
Well, I think the saying probably involved, was what was happening on TV.
Highly involved.
Yeah, that's not.
Didn't even say probably involved. They said highly involved.
Involved in any way. That's again not. We're steering so far away from the actual issue, which is to provide a victim-centered response. Epstein was an actual criminal. We know that Ghislaine Maxwell was a convicted criminal and still is behind bars. And so even if it doesn't matter if you care about this to understand how this can never happen again and want to follow the money and follow the connections possibly to foreign governments that may have protected Epstein, if you want to figure out how to center victims in your response and solve this for the victims of people that we know have been their lives have been diminished by Epstein and his crimes, then these are all reasons to move forward. But every time we start to add this in and look at Bill Clinton, which we'll talk about more later, and look at the president, these are fine to hand out. But when they become partisan games, this is when it gets exhausting, and we're losing the entire point of why people actually began to care, or like me, got more interested in finding out and getting to the bottom of what's going on with Epstein. I mean, it's entertaining at some level when people are posting pictures of old birthday cards, but at some point there are real people out here whose lives were completely changed by this man in a very terrible way. And so I think that at the least we should try to get them real answers that they're looking for.
Yeah, I want real answers, but I also think it's a partisan game and increasingly a witch hunt as far as our major political folks are concerned. Coming up on Rising, President Trump says he has reached a deal with NATO in regards to Greenland. Yay! We'll be right back.
President Trump taking a victory lap this morning after signing the founding charter of the Board of Peace and reportedly striking a compromise with NATO over Greenland.
20 other countries signed the charter in Davos this morning. The president said it would work with the UN to ensure peace in the Middle East, but offered very little new details about how this board would operate. As for Greenland, Trump took to Truth Social yesterday, writing, in part, "We have formed the framework on a future deal with respect to Greenland and, in fact, the entire Arctic region. This solution, if consummated, will be a great one for the United States of America and all NATO nations. Based upon this understanding, I will not be imposing the tariffs that were scheduled to go into effect on February 1st. The president added that additional discussions were being held concerning the Golden Dome, but offered few details.
The deal reportedly doesn't transfer ownership of the island to the U.S., but according to Axios, it does include sections that update that 1951 Greenland Defense Agreement, which allows the U.S. to build military bases. It also reportedly includes portions of raw materials like rare earth minerals, but again, details are sparse.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt heralded the deal framework, telling Axios President Trump is proving once again he's the deal maker in chief if this goes through. This deal, and President Trump is very hopeful it will, the U.S. will be achieving all of its strategic goals with respect to Greenland at very little cost forever.
But some aren't as optimistic about the deal. Social media was alight with Trump critics accusing the president of, once again, chickening out. The Occupy Democrats account, in part, posting, "Taco, Trump chickens out on his Greenland madness, abandons his tariffs, and strikes a deal with Europe that accomplishes nothing and does not grant the United States ownership of the Arctic island. Trump just destroyed our national reputation for nothing." That concern over national reputation seems to have made it to Capitol Hill as well, with some lawmakers telling the Hill they're concerned about the damage Trump's threats have done to NATO. Democratic Congressman Adam Smith says, quote, "It's hard to unring the bell. He was willing to threaten and use coercive power to try to take the sovereignty of another nation, a NATO ally. It has damaged the relationship, and now our partners and allies think that they'd better have a backup plan because they can't depend on us." Yo, Taco was trending yesterday. Taco was trending yesterday. Trump always chickens out. That was trending, and I'm like, did you guys mention it? Because it's not Lindsey News. It was X News.
Now it does platform. Bring a smile to my face because I just think of you laughing.
He chickened out. He said specifically, he went on the stage in Davos and talked all
Do Democrats not know how deals work?
Let me finish. I don't care how deals work. They don't work like this. I don't care. Excuse me. I make a lot of deals with my production company. I don't care how taco deals work.
You do know how deals work.
I don't care how taco deals work. He went on that Davos stage, and for days he's been saying that we have the right title and ownership. That's a quote from the president of this autonomous place, okay? And now he's celebrating that we have an infinite, quote, forever framework deal over the same thing that we had since 1951, that we're allowed to have military bases and boots on the ground in Greenland. Like, no duh, Sherlock. And you know what I really want to say there. Like, you just threatened a NATO ally. You made the entire Europe uncomfortable with our actions, all to just say, oh, never mind. We're just going to do the same thing we've been doing. And also check what kind of minerals you have over there because we want to make some money. Like, what is he doing? Why would you threaten? Why would we go this far with the threat?
Hyperbole. That's the art of the deal. To get something less. He's not going to get that, but you ask for the moon, you demand the moon, and then you settle for something less than. It's deal making 101. Like when I say I will kill you and mount your head on a spike, not you specifically, but just, as I go through my day threatening to violently murder people. I'm not going to do that. I just want a little bit more of what I want sometimes.
There's another way to make a deal when you actually have a relationship with people, and I can speak from a place of experience. Like, let's say we have a standing relationship that's amicable. I don't then threaten you to try to make my amicable and good friend bow to its sensei, right? That's not how we behave. So another part of deal making is to talk to other nations like they're adults, not try to pay its citizens and berate them, and try to get to the point of an ally being an ally and figure out how best can we protect the U.S. in this territory, which is a fair argument, but not threaten them and make them uncomfortable for months on end so much that they have to have meetings with J.D. Vance and publicly state their perspective on not wanting to be owned by the U.S. in any way and constantly battle publicly with our president. I think there's a way less embarrassing way to go about making a deal.
The outcome here is good, so who cares? We're not invading Greenland because we shouldn't. We're not using military force. That would be wrong. We're going to get more of what the administration wanted regarding maintenance of military forces in Greenland and use of minerals and whatever else, so that this can be a strategic resource and a partnership for the U.S. and for NATO, and it's going to bring us all closer together, and great.
So there's nothing wrong to you about the fact that we undermined credibility with our alliances. Many European leaders were uncomfortable with the back and forth. I mean, we see Macron and Trump going at it head to head.
Sometimes
we're supposed to be allies.
European leaders a little uncomfortable.
But why? In what instance, when we were in the wrong, saying we wanted to take over a territory that we didn't want to be taken over?
Trump ruled out taking it over.
No, just yesterday. Yes, he just did yesterday. Don't act like this has been his stance. He was suggesting, like, we're going to have it. We're going to take it, doing interviews the same way that he was suggesting that he might run a third term until he had to admit it's not possible.
Look,
He's being an antagonist.
I'm forced to recognize that it was a negotiating strategy, as is so much.
You're forced to recognize? Who forced you to recognize this?
Because that's what because we're not taking over Greenland, and he's happy with what we got out of it. So
yeah, but
I'm just looking at the results.
So when you're a taco, right? When you chicken out all the time, you are supposed to be happy with results that are not ideal. So this makes it seem like a win for you, because Trump never likes to take an L. So he's going to make everything feel like a win. But he knows, like, let's say
Trump always settles for
less.
Pacify.
No, like, let's say, okay, we're taxing China 100%. And then they go back and forth, trying to push us back, makes it uncomfortable. He realizes all goes on the consumer. We land at the same place we started. It's a win. It's a win. China's paying more tariffs.
Well, the administration is saying this is not the same place we started. This is better.
Okay, well, I'd like to review fully, and I reviewed it in a bit, the 1951 agreement that we already had. And I really would like to see the stark differences, because from what I understand about it, we could already have a military presence. We already can use the water space around there. We already could protect ourselves in any way we see fit. We just had to have a conversation with Denmark about it. And that was the rules. That's layman's terms. So I don't see what the difference is. Now we don't have to have a conversation with them. Now we just put boots on the ground. Now we take their minerals. Like, what's the difference?
It was an agreement.
Yeah, I don't like it. And I watched a nice interview from a Danish woman.
Oh, wow.
I did. You talk about citizen journalists all the time. So somebody just went talking to people out over there, and she was like, you don't get it. We here have a life where we don't care about the riches and the things of the U.S. that you guys put so much emphasis on. We enjoy our life. We're not in this culture of wanting to be ultimate capitalists and have nothing else to aspire to besides ridiculous. That. They just enjoy their life over there, and we're harassing the small place that has Greenland that has a nice life. They like the way they live.
They're a capitalist country. They're a high income.
Well, she's saying we don't live the same lives as you guys.
They're a very high income, high social order. They have
free. She said they had. Remember, I'm quoting her. She said they have free health care.
They also have no immigration.
So she said, why would I want to come to be owned by U.S. when you guys don't even have health care?
They have free health care because it's like all one big extended family that is okay to pay for everything. They don't allow outsiders to take advantage of it. If we looked more like Denmark, we'd have a lot less of a lot of people.
Up next, Utah Senator Mike Lee says Charlie Kirk's assassin should be publicly executed. Don't go anywhere.
Senator Mike Lee has called for the public execution of Charlie Kirk's assassin. In an ex-post late Monday, Lee wrote, "Execute Tyler Robinson in public."
Lee's remarks came after Kirk's widow, Erica Kirk, filed court documents on Monday calling for a speedy trial. Erica accused the alleged killer's defense team of using delay tactics amid the high-profile court proceedings.
Erica Kirk's attorney, Jeffrey Neiman, formally notified the court that Kirk is invoking her rights as a victim under Utah law, which guarantees a prompt resolution of criminal cases.
It's not the first time Lee has called for Robinson's public execution. In a post on Friday on X, Lee shared a post about Robinson's court hearings and wrote, quote, "Tyler Robinson publicly executed Charlie Kirk. Tyler Robinson should be publicly executed."
Salt Lake Tribune reports that Robinson's defense team has raised concerns about elected officials offering their opinions about the case. Robinson's defense team also noted that this has amounted to prejudicial pretrial publicity and could affect their ability to find fair jurors for his trial.
Now, according to state code, executions are not public in Utah. It is generally limited to a number of family members for both the victim and the condemned, police and prosecutors. No one under 18 can witness an execution.
Yeah, I'm fine with Tyler Robinson, if found guilty after he is afforded all his rights and the presumption of innocence, although I have no real doubt that he is guilty. I am ambivalent about whether he gets life in prison or the death penalty. Doesn't matter to me either way. We don't. I don't like a little bit of the execute in public. That's a kind of a bloodthirstiness that I think is not appropriate for a public official or really just a man in general. We should execute people not for vengeance, but to keep the society safe from violent criminals, is what I would argue. It's not about revenge. It's about making us safer. So again, I'm not clutching my pearls. I was opposed to the death penalty because if you wrongfully execute someone, you can't make it up to them. And I was thinking life in prison was better. You know, in a lot of, we have such compelling video footage now of, it's just, the evidence is so overwhelming in these high profile cases of guilt that I am much less troubled by that. So if he's executed, fine, but doesn't need a show. I think Mike Lee's idea is that would deter violence, but I don't know, showy kind of public execution trials, that could have a contagion effect and make people want, these people, some of them, not, I don't know the Tyler Robinson case, but some of these people want the limelight and the spotlight. It seems like you could have like a mass shooting effect where they're doing copycat. I don't know. Don't call attention to it. Let them die in anonymity behind closed doors is what I would say. So I don't agree with that at all, really.
Well, I would tell Senator Lee this is not medieval times, okay? This is not the mid-1800s. This is not the colonial era, right? We're not having people publicly executed in the square, Game of Thrones style, even because he calls for it, right? I think we've passed that specifically because first we need to wait for due process, and he's also saying that right now before we actually have a conviction. Obviously, like you said, there is an overwhelming amount of evidence, but, you know, we are trying to bring back civility after the death of Charlie Kirk. The idea was the fact that people should be allowed to share their perspectives and opinions, and they should not die for that, right? We live in a free speech country, so I don't think we should scale back to when we used to publicly execute people more, and also go by the states. We read in the intro what the state would allow, even if he does do the death penalty. Public execution sounded more like a square, like watch them die, as opposed to, I don't know how he meant it, if he just meant like injection and people the regular way, but open for the world to see on television. I don't know who wants to see that.
I'm actually opposed to lethal injection, actually. Lethal injection, we have tried to make clinical and medical the process of killing people. It has a disturbing failure rate. It's not swift. It's not quick. I mean, just shoot someone in the head is a much better, quicker, less painful way to do it.
Wants to see that.
Well, if we don't want to see it, then we shouldn't do it. We were trying to make it seem, well, we got to go.
Senator Bernie Sanders giving his take on why so many Americans don't feel aligned with the Democrat or Republican parties right now. I'll look at that next in my lens.
All right, Lindsay, what's in your lens today?
Let's get to it. So Theo Von isn't your typical political gatekeeper. He's a comedian, a podcaster, and whether he's out to be or not, one of the most influential conversationalists in today's MAGA-friendly media ecosystem, that's still up for debate. But what's making him interesting isn't that he leans right or left. It's that he doesn't fully belong to either side. He said it plainly on a recent episode of This Past Weekend, his podcast.
It doesn't even feel like either one of these parties works for anybody anymore. Like, if anything, in the past few years, it's really started to feel like, oh, all these guys are working for somebody else, and we're just this other group of people down here.
That line really reflects how a lot of Americans feel right now, politically homeless, and the numbers back up that statement. A Gallup poll shows a record high 45% of U.S. adults identified as political independents in 2025. That's nearly half the country. That's not apathy, that's disillusionment. Theo's guest this week was Senator Bernie Sanders, someone who knows what it means to operate outside traditional party lines. Bernie made it clear that starting a new party isn't realistic right now, which is why he caucuses with Democrats, even as he argues the party itself is split.
We are trying to move the Democratic Party to be a party that stands with working class Americans and has the courage to take on powerful special interests. Now, there's another faction of the Democratic Party that, doesn't like Trump for, I think, a lot of right reasons. I agree with him. But basically cuddles up to the moneyed interests. And that's the vision that we have.
That divide matters because it helps explain why so many voters don't feel represented by either side. The conversation turned into immigration and ICE, another issue where public opinion is shifting. A CBS YouGov poll found that 61% of Americans now describe ICE as being, quote, too tough. More Americans believe enforcement efforts are sweeping up people beyond dangerous criminals, including those who've lived here for years, worked, and have raised families. Now, Bernie laid out what he believes most Americans actually do agree on.
When I think what most Americans agree with, if you have lived in this, even if you came across the border illegally, but if you have obeyed the rules of America, you haven't committed crimes, you're working hard, you're raising your family, you need a path towards citizenship as part of comprehensive immigration reform. And by the way, given the fact that we have worker shortages all over this country, we need those workers, okay?
Then he went further, criticizing how President Trump is using ICE now.
And I think it's Trump saying, I have the power, and we got domestic army, it's called ICE, and we're going to go out there, and we're going to arrest, and we're going to intimidate. And part of that, this is what Trumpism is about. It's intimidation. All right, you're in the media, you're CBS, you say something, I'm going to sue you, you know? Theo, you say something I don't like, I may sue you. You know, I don't like Venezuela, I'm going to, send in the troops. I got the power, and I'm going to use it. I really... That scares me because that's what authoritarianism is about.
What makes this moment notable isn't Bernie Sanders saying it, it's where he's saying it on the Theo Vaughn podcast, a space that doesn't fit neatly into left or right, but reaches millions who are skeptical of both. What this moment shows isn't a shift toward the left or the right. It's a demand for accountability. Voters aren't asking for purity tests or party loyalty. They're asking for policies that reflect how people actually live, work, and raise families. Where nearly half the country identifies as independent and majorities say enforcement has gone too far, the message to me is clear. The old political playbook is not matching public reality. I watched that interview and thought I was going to take away one thing of like him going off, and I took away a whole other thing, and I ended up changing my lens based on the fact that I don't watch Theo Vaughn often. I thought that because he supported Trump or seemed very amicable to him, that I just put him in the bro podcast lane. But he certainly surprised me in that interview. He asked real questions. He seemed empathetic to everything going on and seemed to echo some of the thoughts of, I think, the everyday American that's not in these fringes of either party, and looks at situations like, okay, yes, immigration reform was necessary. A lot of people polled, or if you ask people, might say that ICE might be going too far. There are people who believe they aren't, but I think a lot of the country agrees Renee Good shouldn't be dead right now. And so, there's just a lot that's going on, I think, right now that's making people question, well, are Democratic leaders the answer, or is no party serving me right now?
I mean, it's important, I think, to remember that Theo Vaughn and Joe Rogan came from a kind of Bernie Sanders direction and orientation previously. They were economic populists and social moderates, and maybe socially and culturally not woke at all, so anti-liberal and maybe more comfortable with the right in that way, but economically very in line with Bernie Sanders, and on foreign policy very in line with Bernie Sanders and anti-interventionists on the right and libertarians. So there's a cohesive ideology there that was not comfortable in either the Republican side or the Democratic side for a while. And I mean, frankly, it used to constitute a lot of a Rising's audience when this show first caught attention, when the hosts were Crystal and Sagar years ago, before me. Crystal was very passionately pro-Bernie Sanders, and even a right-wing populist could appreciate some of the things that he was saying. And so, part of that, it was I noticed it from afar, this massive alternate media ecosystem and interest in this political figure. But what happened is, because of COVID and because of some other things, that became less, and also because of how Bernie Sanders was treated by the establishment of his own party, by Hillary Clinton.
He talks about that, yeah.
They didn't really have a home on the Democratic side anymore, and they've tried to figure out if they have a home in the Republican side, and it's not a neat fit, as many of the things Bernie Sanders is saying about ICE enforcement resonate with a Theo Vaughn type. And I appreciate Bernie Sanders saying it, and I respect him, and I appreciate some of the things he says. My criticism of him would be he's calling out Donald Trump for wielding government power in these showy ways on ICE and some
Venezuela
policy. But Bernie Sanders, if he had power, would also wield government power in a very, I would argue, heavy-handed and powerful way to, go after to raise taxes, to increase regulation, to confiscate more wealth from
successful people. Is that really
people.
apples to apples, though? I think if you put policies forth, that's different than putting boots on the ground in American cities. And we heard the president when all the military leaders were in one location because Hegseth called them all there last year, and the president spoke to the crowd and was like, basically, I'm paraphrasing here, but get practice in these American cities. And people condemn those statements like, what do you mean practice while you're in these cities fighting crime and immigration? That's not a place to practice. And what we're seeing out of Minnesota now is it looks like, what's going on here? We can't organize our leadership. And Mayor Fry was on Cuomo's show last night to respond to everybody that says, well, if you would have worked with the president, we wouldn't be here right now. And he said, I don't trust what's coming out of the administration to be true. They've proven that they overstepped. So you're just expecting a local leader he wasn't even told that J.D. Vance was coming to town to have this dialogue with him. He's like, how do you leave out the mayor of the city that you say is the most troublesome? They're not seriously trying to come up with a solution. So you have to admit that some of what Bernie Sanders is saying, how the president just makes decisions, skipping over whoever the most important decision makers usually are in that process, whether it's Congress with Venezuela or whether it's leadership in Minnesota.
Okay, but Democratic, new incoming Democrat, Virginia, Abigail Spanberger, supposed to be a moderate Democrat. You know what's the first thing she's done since taking office? She repealed the popular orders by Glenn Youngkin, previous Republican governor, to have local law enforcement cooperate with ICE, not in mass deportation of absolutely everyone, but for illegal immigrants with an additional violent criminal offense. That's what the participation was. Here it was in Virginia. I think that's the same thing most people can get on board with. She's repealed that. There will be no cooperation with ICE at all. It'll be a sanctuary city type thing. That's the common sense Democratic moderate? That's what she's doing? That's what I'm saying. On the Democratic side, these policies are so far to the left and so far outside the norms of what the American people want. And I think the administration has gone too far as well. And I've been willing to call that out. I don't like a lot of what I'm seeing, and I think this is very unfortunate. But we had a sensible, moderate approach in Virginia under the previous governor, who was great, Glenn Youngkin. That's gone now.
Well, I'm going to look into what Spanberger actually did. I know sometimes it's overstated in the headlines, but I like to really understand exactly what all.
Look at it. This is from objective, mainstream sources, and I was like, wow, even they're saying it was just, this doesn't look good, but maybe we'll talk about it later. Next up, a former president and first lady held in contempt of Congress, and a judge says the court doesn't have the authority to supervise compliance at the DOJ. All the Epstein latest coming up. Stay with us. Well, the House Oversight Committee moved yesterday to hold a former president and his wife in contempt of Congress.
That's Bill and Hillary Clinton. They were subpoenaed to testify before the committee no later than last week, both regarding their relationship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. However, neither showed up. Instead, they posted a scathing letter to social media addressed to the committee chair, James Comer, insisting that their written testimony they submitted should be adequate, and that not accepting it was a partisan attempt to imprison them. Despite those accusations, both votes to hold the former First Family in contempt were bipartisan, with nearly 10 Democrats voting in favor of the Bill Clinton resolution.
Wow. As for Oversight's investigation, Committee Chair Comer says they aren't done calling witnesses. The panel is set to depose Epstein's co-conspirator, former girlfriend Ghislaine Maxwell, on February 9th. That deposition will reportedly be conducted virtually, as she is, of course, still serving her 20-year sentence in the state of Texas.
This all comes as Representatives Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna are apparently doing everything they can to enforce the Epstein Files Transparency Act. You may remember that late last year, they set a December 19th deadline for the DOJ to release all documents related to Epstein. But more than a month after the deadline, the department says they still have millions of documents to review. Massie and Khanna asked a judge earlier this month to appoint an independent monitor to ensure that the DOJ is complying with the law. In a letter to the judge, the two called the DOJ's conduct a, quote, flagrant violation of the mandatory disclosure obligations under the law, and added the DOJ cannot be trusted with making mandatory disclosures under the act.
But yesterday, a federal judge denied that request. The judge ruled he did not have the authority to supervise DOJ compliance.
Well, first you should look at the Democrats here, the 10 of them that voted to have, to look at Bill and Hillary and say this is not for them.
They want to grill Trump on this so badly, they're willing to throw Bill and Hillary under the bus.
But why is it throw under the bus? Two things can be true at the same time. The investigation can be driven by what looks like a Republican committee trying to play partisan games,
revenge.
Right? And no powerful person, Democrat, Republican, or rich person in America should be able to be exempt from testifying in a case that's about one of the most catastrophic failures of leadership to catch somebody earlier or allow all this to go on that was a criminal and hurting the most innocent, the best parts of our society, which are younger people. People that have you always talk about how we're taking care of the older people. Like younger people were abused by this man and their childhood's ruined. And a lot of them have no accountability for it and just want to know.
Childhoods.
Yeah. You don't think that's the case if you're underage and somebody's ruining somebody's, I still think you're an adolescent before you go to college and you have an entire life ahead of you. And I think that we should have some more empathy for the victims in this situation and understand that when you start seeing bipartisan people call out members of their own party saying, step forward, well, maybe Republicans can take a message from this playbook and say, okay, Trump, you testify as well. Everybody testify. It doesn't mean you're guilty. Testifying doesn't mean guilty. Testifying means helping get to the bottom and getting answers around money, around connections, around what led us here to Epstein and how to avoid anything like this happening again. It should be a fair ask from both President Clinton and President Trump.
I suppose. I have not been super impressed with James Comer. I'm having flashbacks to his efforts to get to the truth of the Hunter Biden influence peddling scheme, where, again, very bold claims were made about it. I felt like every day I was being gaslit. New evidence is coming. We'll demonstrate for sure the conclusive proof that the Biden crime family, it goes all the way to the top. What they uncovered was certainly unethical behavior by Hunter Biden himself, poor judgment. I think, the sweetheart deal he almost got that would have exempted him from any further scrutiny of this was terrible. He absolutely tried to leverage his connection to his father for foreign powers and foreign business interests. That was shown, but Comer was always taking it a step further and trying to imply that he had the evidence that was going to bring down Biden himself. And eventually I just got to the point where okay, well, let's see it then. And nothing. And this kind of feels like that to me.
So you don't think that there's any merit to trying to figure out who paid Epstein, who funded his lifestyle? How did this man become as wealthy as he did? And getting some answers to that?
We already know that.
No, we don't know all the information.
No,
There's more than a million pages that
there are heads over them, but it's...
Yeah, but you don't accept conspiracy theories. You just said you don't accept them earlier when Scott Jennings was on CNN and we were getting peddled conspiracy theories.
I know, but we have this information. He was a hedge fund manager.
Yeah. How do you go from A to B, though? How did he get to the finances that he had in the hedge fund?
If you manage a hedge fund really well, you make a lot of money.
You wouldn't just go from this job to hedge fund manager. So we're trying to understand every single dot and connect it to his wealth. Okay, and that might be connected to some powerful. Maybe the aliens did, but there are real people connected to this.
Zodiac killer, and it was, the underwater. They went back in time and they built the pyramids, and that's how they.
Well, you're an anomaly here. You're an anomaly here that doesn't want to know about this. No, I think people actually want to know. You brought it up the other day. You understand there's people that want to know: was he connected to foreign governments? Who was paying him? Why he was able to avoid serious prosecution for so long?
Was he connected to a foreign government?
Who intervened in the 2007 Florida case?
Interesting question.
No, it's not. Why was he given unprecedented non-prosecution agreement?
Because the evidence against him was not strong enough.
Yeah, you said that this is thoroughly explained to you. No one else feels as comfortable as you do.
Because no one cares about the facts. They just care about indicting the Clintons or indicting Trump. They have partisan blinders on.
But if both of them come forward and testify, then we can be done with this conversation, right?
We'll never be done with this.
Why not? We can go to the next Democrat or next Republican.
We'll never be done with the Kennedy assassination, and we'll never be done with.
We're not talking about it today on air. We're done with it for the most part for right now.
Even on this show, we've periodically had new evidence emerges on. People still talk about it because they're not satisfied with the answer.
Okay, well, we can start with releasing, like Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie are trying to do, releasing the files that by law are required to be released. That I understand is more than 1 million files. Probably they don't need to be as redacted heavily as the first batch that was released. And maybe we won't play partisan games to try to show more pictures of Clinton and Trump, okay, because we got that part. They knew each other. That doesn't mean they're guilty. And maybe we can release the rest of the files, which is overwhelmingly more than it's already been released. And that'll get us in the right direction.
I wish everyone was this worked up about and this strenuously focused on where COVID came from and how to make
sure
that doesn't happen again. Right.
People were tweeting me that I need to be on your side about prosecuting Dr. Fauci. People are that worked up about this.
Good. And I wish our Congress would reflect that because, with all due respect to any victims of Jeffrey Epstein, millions of people globally died from COVID. And it could happen again. There's no reason it couldn't happen again if we allow the same things to be done. This seems ever so slightly more important to me to get the bottom of. But so many people are like, well, I guess we'll never know. Oh, well.
No, because you made it clear that for you, that your priority is putting Dr. Fauci in jail in that regard as opposed to getting to the bottom of it. And I think the priority with Epstein is that since he's dead and Ghislaine Maxwell's already in jail, is getting to the bottom of it. So do you actually care about getting to the bottom of it or just seeing Dr. Fauci behind bars?
I care about preventing another pandemic. That's all. That's what I care about. No, I don't have a revenge. I'm not out for revenge. I want to make sure the ideology that he represents, which plausibly paid for and financed and did the science behind creating this thing, is shut down forever so that it doesn't happen again. That's what I care about. Prosecuting him, by that we mean investigating and holding accountable if appropriate, with due process and all of that, but not closing the door to an inquiry of whether our science is what was the proximate cause of it, which is, again, what our FBI and CIA and Energy Department believe. They just won't explain why they believe that. I'd like to know.
Listen, we can do both, but since we're right here and since a law was passed that these files need to be released, let's just start with the fact that the DOJ is skipping over the law right now. And that's where we are. Up next, Senator Ted Cruz's Laguna Beach trip went viral online as Texas is preparing for an extreme winter storm. We'll be right back after this. Senator Ted Cruz apparently flew to Southern California as a severe winter storm is headed right towards Texas.
Political commentator Shea Jordan Smith shared this photograph of Cruz on X, saying the senator was headed toward Laguna Beach.
Now, many on social media criticize his travel. Legal commentator Tristan Snell reshared Cruz's viral photograph and wrote, quote, "Texas is about to get a terrible ice storm. Ted Cruz is leaving Texas again, this time for Laguna Beach, California." And former Obama staffer Tommy Vietor wrote, quote, "You have to admire the consistency from Ted Cruz. When there's a crisis in Texas, he sprints out of town."
Spokesperson for Ted Cruz responded to the criticism online, telling local Houston outlet KHU, quote, "Senator Cruz is currently on pre-planned work travel. It was scheduled weeks in advance. He will be back in Texas before the storm is projected to hit."
Cruz faced similar criticism for making a now infamous trip in 2021 to Cancun during Winter Storm Uri. Many even referred to the senator as Cancun Cruz, a nickname that stuck for months.
According to the latest forecast, a widespread winter storm will hammer parts of the South, Midwest, and Northeast on Friday, through Monday, with potentially damaging ice and heavy snow for millions from New Mexico and Texas. North Texas is expected to get the worst of the storm, including freezing rain, sleet, and snow. And we're preparing for some inclement weather here as well and all across the nation. I had misremembered this in my head. I thought Ted Cruz was attacked. I thought it was like a COVID thing, like he
left during COVID? Yeah, I thought that it was the COVID thing too. It was 2021, so we were in the middle of COVID and it was a storm. Remember that last ice storm that really deteriorated
Look,
Texas?
I was happy to shame public officials for trying to skirt COVID rules that they were enforcing on others. Gavin Newsom, that was when I first became so
I know, Nancy Pelosi, you're about to go down the poll list. I know, they told us don't get our hair done.
I was furious, but that was them imposing on us something that they weren't themselves following. Is the hypocrisy that was so galling. This is not, the storm happening is not Ted Cruz's fault. I don't know that, what?
So he can go on vacation. He makes a pattern out of this. Not only is he going to Laguna Beach because he has business, no. He went to, what was the last one that he was in? He went to Cancun during the pandemic because he had business and there also was a storm. But don't forget, last July, there were floods that hit Texas that literally left 135 people dead. And this man was in, drum rolls please, Greece. And then he flew back pretty much when it was done, said that was the first flight that he could catch. He's always on vacation, so either we should call him Vacation Cruz or we should just say that he's leaving intentionally when he knows it's going to be uncomfortable, like people, including him, because it doesn't matter how wealthy you are, you can lose power. You also can have a generator. He's like fleeing town when stuff gets bad.
He's a senator. He's not the governor of the state. He's not a mayor. He does not directly coordinate logistics, rescue operations, any of those things. So it would just be, it's purely for optics, maybe purely for optics.
A lot of politics is
wait
about
out
optics.
the storm. Okay. You know what? If people are upset about this, fine. He's there. If he's your senator and this makes you mad at him, I'm not going to tell you.
Governor Abbott has declared a state of emergency
there.
in Texas. You got to stay home and protect and stay with your state. Optically be available for people if they want to ask questions about what the plans are. Have you conversed with Governor Abbott? I think he should have conversations with mayors and governors in the state that he represents. I think that's appropriate to be around, to be accessible. When your governor declared a state of emergency, you go to California to chill. What day is he coming back? The storm's going to be, it's going to be the eye of the storm on Saturday. He's going to come back in the middle of that? Tell me how he's going to come back.
I'll let you have this one. I'm just saying I don't care, but if you care, that's fine. You could.
I mean, just think about, like, I know I know even with the winter storm here, you're like, oh, it's not going to be that bad. It's fine. Like, yes, for the most part.
I mean, I'm kidding. I have no idea. I don't
know.
know. I'm not privy to any
But
special information.
you and
maybe
I might find our ways to work and be fine. But in Texas, it's a serious issue that they need to solve about long term, how you handle, because they don't happen often. We said the last one was 2021. These storms that the state has been crippled because of. And so the fact that we see this coming again, knowing how many people died and got hurt the last time, I mean, it's a serious matter. So if you have time to go to California, maybe you have time to put your head together with local leaders in the same state that you represent and figure out what's a better solution so that when this happens again in 2030, we're not going down for the third time in recent history. I mean, all power grids were knocked out last time. Like, it was a disaster. You got to step it up.
Well, people should not panic, but brace themselves for some very serious weather all over the country, and don't avoid travel in icy conditions, and be even more responsible when you're driving, and do all that. And
that's why you got to stay close to the job this weekend. Make sure that you make it to work.
I'm close to the
job.
You
have to be closer.
As close as
you have to be 5 steps from the job.
Yeah, I'm not going to be camped out here in my sleeping bag, but I will be here on Monday. Never you worry about that. That does it for us on Rising Live. Look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way today. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hill's YouTube channel so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. See you later.